Next up, we have another session, Mastering IP Partnerships, a guide to IP and brand management. And for that, we have Elin Jonsson and Wally Nguyen from Eastside Games. So please make your way to the stage.
Cool. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Elin Jonsson, and this is Wally. And we are here talking about mastering IP partnerships. So I hope this will be a little bit of a guide to IP and brand management. I also have, there we go.
Yeah, so between the two of us, we have about 30 years of experience in mobile games. At Eastside Games, we primarily focus on IP and brand mobile games itself. So we'll share some secrets, not too many secrets. We'll share some guides and tips for anyone interested in delving into the world of combining great mobile games with world-renowned and recognized IPs. So I'm Wally Nguyen. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Eastside Games. Been in games for a while, but if I had any two claims of fame before Eastside Games, if you've ever seen a playable ad, I have the dubious honor of being part of that creation of the ads that you can play before you download a game, when I was CEO of mNectar. And then right across the street was where Skills was with a Z, and I was the very first head of sales and content there, and then we eventually took the company public.
And I'm Elin Jonsson. I'm the Chief Business Officer at Eastside Games, and I worked at Eastside Games for the last 8 years, making mobile games for over 15 years. And my background is more on the creative side, and then I moved over to managing all our 13 IP partners at Eastside Games. So that is all about us. And next slide is about Eastside Games as a company. So we are located, our head office is in Vancouver, Canada, and we are a market leader integrating big IPs into mobile games. And we are specializing in narrative, idle, and puzzle games, so match 3 games. We are a publisher and we are also a developer. We have big brands and IPs like the American The Office, Doctor Who, Star Trek, RuPaul's Drag Race, a Canadian favorite, which is Trailer Park Boys, that slowly makes it into USA. Power Rangers, so many different IPs that we are working with and that we have been working in for many years. One example, I've been managing the relationship with Trailer Park Boys for over 8 years, NBC for over 5 years. These are long relationships.
Yeah, so we have the honor of working with some of the world's biggest brands, as we've been going over. So BBC for Doctor Who, Squishmallows, probably one of the biggest toy companies in the world right now, AEW, Paramount with Star Trek, World of Wonder for RuPaul. Yeah, so a great list and proud to be partnered with them. So for anyone that wants to start thinking about how to work with an IP, one of the first key things to think about is their motivation. And revenue, maybe that would be the first thing you think of, like we need to make money. And that definitely is one of the aspects of why an IP or a brand is interested in making games, but it's not the first reason. Usually the first reason is engaging their current audience. So if you have a show like The Office, or if you have something like, let's stick with shows like The Office or Doctor Who, traditionally that's the only way you can engage with that content, right, is watch the show. So how do we engage with them a little bit differently, maybe in an interactive way, and that way is games. And then there's expanding that current audience. So I think a really good example is Doctor Who. Doctor Who is very, very popular in the UK, maybe not quite as popular in North America. So when we engaged with them on a mobile game, it was really about broadening their audience, broadening their reach into North America and the rest of the world. Inadvertently, when we released Doctor Who and it was doing well, Doctor Who got added to Disney+. So that was a really nice addition, and again, expanding that audience. So number 1 and number 2 is audience and audience. And then third, make money, right? Businesses need to make money to thrive and grow, and so number 3 is revenue. And then fourth is tied to audience, which is marketing. Again, with a lot of shows, you can only kind of stream the show, you can distribute the show and people can watch it, but there's really no way to engage with that audience beyond that reach. As we know with mobile games, you can interact, you can push notifications, people can sign up for newsletters, you can let them know that live events are coming. You have a much more engaged audience when it comes to a game, and that's why marketing is another key aspect of it.
And yeah, this slide is probably my personal favorite. It's very, very close to my heart. And it's can we express the brand's essence in our mobile game? How can we truly understand the brand deeply so it's not a brand slap? It's an extension and celebration of the IP in the mobile format. And one of the first things we are doing, of course, is the brand guidelines. So as early as possible, get the brand guidelines, understand them, read them. But the guidelines is just the top layer. Go deeper. Watch the shows. Watch all the shows. Try to really understand what makes this. What is the essence? And if you are not a fan of the IP that you want to integrate into your mobile game, find someone on your team, hire someone. You need at least one person that loves the lore, that loves this IP that you're integrating. Super important. And it's something that we see that the IP partner really like. They want to know that their brand, their IP is in safe, caring hands. It's their baby that you're taking care of. And super important, the brand slapping. That's something that we don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not going to go well with the fans. They are going to feel that you're not authentic. And in the end of the day, it's just not a good long-term business strategy. And also understand and remind yourself that every IP partner that you're working with will have unique needs. Just because you have worked with Hasbro doesn't mean that you can apply exactly the same learnings at NBC or Paramount or whoever you're working with. And that can be a good exercise to remind the team as well, because they might be like, oh, but this other IP partner, they were completely fine that we launched this half-made icon or logo in tech launch, but this current partner you're working with, no, nothing can be launched. Everything needs to be approved. You can't do anything without everything tightened up. So understand your IP partner, truly understand what's important to them, have early conversations to understand, do they care about the narrative? Do they care about the mobile? We have worked with partners that have never done a mobile game before. They're looking at us for guidance, but they care super much about the looks and feel. That's what they care about. And then they leave the game mechanics to us. And then we have other partners that really care about the game mechanics as well. So learn what your partner want to do. So one size fits all approach will not work. Also assess the IP's game knowledge. As I said, is this a partner that have done many mobile games before? Good, then they know that. Or maybe you work with a partner that you are like, this is how we launch a mobile game. We have a tech launch, this is a tech launch. Or you need to guide them through, handhold them through experience because they don't really know the KPIs. You can just like tell them about ARPDAU. They don't know, they might not know what that means. Establish a clear point of contact for yourself. Who on the IP partner side is your point of contact and who on the game studio side is your point of contact. Shouldn't be the whole team, one person that every information is channeled through. And yeah, just some general tips. Set up an initial meeting so you get as much information as early as possible, and we have every second week, we have a touch point with our IP partner. Yeah, I think that's enough.
Yeah, so one thing to mention, we have a game with AEW. It's a wrestling game. And one of our writers was an ex-wrestler. She was a professional wrestler. So she's really passionate about it and helps us understand how to approach it. So I can't second Elin's point enough of you need to love this show. You need to love this movie. Like The Office, I've watched that thing from beginning to finish 12 times, you know? The hijinks of Dwight and Jim. I know almost every single line, so be passionate. Don't fake it. They can tell. And that happens when you initiate the deal, right? When you talk to them about it, what's your core knowledge? And it's not just knowledge, but what's your passion? Do you have a love of it? You're representing the future of this potential game, right? If you're highly passionate, you have high credibility, they'll believe you that you'll take it from beginning to finish in the way that they want to. You have to treat it like your baby because it's their baby. But in terms of initial deal guidelines, one thing to understand that's really important that many people skip over before it ever hits contract is, what do you get, right? So do you get, if there's real actors, real actresses, do you get their likeness? Do you get to use those actors, or do you have to do something else? If it's animation or like The Office, we had to stylize, right? That's a real action, real people in that show. We had to animate that into a game. So what are you allowed to do with that? How can you express it? Is there music? That's not an obvious one. And the music world is actually much more complex than, let's say, entertainment, right? Who owns the music rights? It can be pretty complex. Is it a closed world? Can you create new stories? With The Office, there's so many episodes. You can, you have an entire universe in and of itself, but sometimes you want to add additional stories, especially with The Office not, being a live show anymore. So if you want to expand the universe, you want to create these things, it's really good to explain early on that that's what you want and kind of get a feel for what's going to be allowed. Know the organizational structure. Are you working with the talent themselves, like the actor or the actress? Are you working with an agency? Or are you working with a larger company? What's important to each of these people? What's important to the talent and the actor is going to be very, very different. Usually, I almost guarantee very different than the business needs from their agent. And then projections. How much money will the game make? Many people may be tempted, like, it's going to be $1 billion game. Maybe, maybe not. We know how hard that is, right? So when I deliver projections, I do low, medium, high, and my high isn't that high. I usually can get complaints about that, like, why can't we be bigger? It's like, well, in reality, if we're a blockbuster and we're making $1 billion, none of this forecast matters. Also, if the game fails and we make 0, again, the forecast doesn't really matter. What we're really trying to optimize for is what's the middle road, right? Like, if it's an average game, what's the best we can get? And that's a realistic approach. For me, it's about credibility of saying, hey, there's 0, then there's 100, but what's the most likely average in between? And it's all about setting those expectations, right? It all wraps up to that.
Yeah, and then approval process. This is normally what scares people working with IP partners because this can be a little tricky. So my advice here is just early on, talk about it. When you start in concept, just set it up as early as possible. I try most of our partners that are flexible and they allow us to do this. We use Trello to set up a system that is very, very deadly simple. You move a card and they give feedback and they throw the card back. It's visual, it's simple, highly recommend that. Many IP partners though have their own internal system like MediaBox or other system they use. Those are normally quite complicated and it's almost like the last step. The last thing you have done can go into MediaBox to facilitate the IP's needs. But I highly recommend something more simple first, like Trello, even email, even Slack, just to vibe check or check if you're in the right direction. Earlier the better. As soon as you have something, rather show instead of like, I hope this is okay, and then you need to go back and fix it. Especially when you work with like animations or something, you want it as early as possible. Yeah, dates and deadlines. This is super important when you do your planning. Just remember that most contracts have 10 days approval process, and they don't take revisions in consideration. So let's say that you have 10 days, they review your asset, they throw it back to you, then they really have another 10 days, which makes it quite hard. I recommend producers to at least plan for 1 revision, so you have 20 days when an asset needs to be done. This can add 3 to 6 months timeline. It's important to remember when you work with a partner, the more you work with them, you will find a system that works and it will get easier for every month that goes because you start to learn what they care about and you build up a relationship when you are, for example, you get a feature from Apple, you need your assets approved quicker. The partner, most, like 99% will understand that such escalation will happen and they will be facilitating that. Yeah, so the planning is super important.
Yeah, so to wrap up a little bit, understand their motivations, what matters to them, and make sure that they understand what matters to them matters to you. What are the brand guidelines? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? Also, gray areas, cover those gray areas, especially if they've never made a game before. There's going to be a lot of those. Tailor your approach. But to tailor your approach, again, start from the beginning, which is, do you love the show? Do you love the movie? Do you love the property? And if you do, that tailoring is going to become pretty natural. Deal guidelines, just make sure you have a checklist of what you want to get out of that in terms of rights, and explain those very clearly, and setting realistic projections and realistic expectations. Approvals, as Elin just mentioned, you got to plan for time. Add 3, 6 months, maybe a little bit longer to your entire development timeline, and you'll probably be a little bit safer. And that all goes to dates and timelines. Like, how do you explain those early on, and make your process about as smooth as possible? And that's our presentation, and we have 3 minutes or so. So any questions, we're happy to take.
Testing. Is this? Hello?
Thanks for that. That was great. I'm not expecting to answer in specifics because I know you're probably under confidentiality, but from a kind of license perspective, in terms of the royalty that they would take, is there a kind of wide degree of variance between the percentage depending on the IP? If you know, just you don't have to say specifically you folks, but like as an industry standard, you know, where should it sort of fall when you're sort of negotiating with a partner?
Yeah, that's a good question. So some of the terms, the common terms are going to be a minimum guarantee. Well, it's all licensing fees, right? Basically, how does an IP or a brand make money through this partnership? And you just wrap it up as one umbrella term, which is fees. The first term is typically a minimum guarantee. It's how much you will pay them no matter what, right? If you never ship the game, if the game fails, even if the game is a tremendous success, what is the minimum that they will get? You'll owe that no matter what. That's typically a deal term. And the second is the one you just asked about, which is what is the royalty percentage? You're right, I can't tell you specifically what we do, but I can tell you that the range is somewhere between 10 to 20%. That's usually a safe range. Now, obviously, the bigger the IP, I'll mention that we don't work with is Star Wars. They'll probably ask for a whole lot more. Pokemon, if you have a child, throw them into the terms. So the bigger they are, the more they'll ask, but it's reasonable in some cases, right? But if it's a normal IP, then 10 to 20.